Video, we are going to discuss about a lot many things. The prime focus on would be how to prepare for the taxation paper per se specifically. Also, we are going to discuss about a lot many case studies, how that would be beneficial for you. Case study in the sense the live practical examination that would help you in the approach of studying for CA intermediate examination direct taxation paper. So in this paper, most of you think that is an difficult paper. Tax for most of the people, tax is a difficult paper. Why? Because everybody thinks that's one of the toughest paper. As we have to remember a lot of sections, there are a lot of provisions, there are a lot of amendments, there are a lot of explanations and all this. For example, if you start with a section, say particular section 6, in that section 6, for that, the residential status is defined as per section 6 of Income Tax Act 1961. Then there is a proviso, then there is an explanation, then there are additional rules which are being notified by CBDT, there are circulars, there are notifications, a lot of things which are being issued by the CBDT. Hence, everybody thinks that's a difficult paper, and also there are a lot of amendments which come on. So, if you have prepared for this examination, for next one you have to again prepare it. So there are a lot of amendments, there are a lot of circulars, there are revisions, there are notifications. Hence, everybody is afraid of that paper. But according to my opinion, taxation is one of the simplest paper in the entire syllabus of ICAI. Why? Because taxation is nothing to do with the theoretical things. It is a practical paper. In this paper, the institute just try to enhance your practical ability, because the taxation is the bread and butter for 60 to 70% of chartered accountants. Let it be in practice, let it be in industry, let it be in any field. Taxation plays an important part in the whole Indian economy, and hence this is the bread and butter for chartered accountants. One. So my introduction I have give. My name is Ajinkya Hiran. I'm a CA final. In CA final, I scored 74 marks in direct taxation examination. I was center topper for direct taxation examination. I work with Ernst& Young, and now I'm sharing my thoughts with you. In the CA intermediate paper, it is of total three modules. Three modules. First module is that of the basics which you have. Second module, just talk about the second module is about the advanced level, and the last module is of the indirect taxes subject which you have. The study material of indirect tax subject. In indirect taxation, you have again two modules, module 1 and module 2 of GST. The icing and the cake in this is the institute has given almost 30 marks for you as separate MCQs. This 30 marks will hence enable you to score a very good number in your intermediate examinations. In intermediate examinations, I can bet on this. You can minimum score 65 to 70 marks in this paper. Why? Because you have two added advantage. One is of 30 marks which are being given to the MCQs, and the 15 marks which you have for indirect taxes, that is for GST. GST is very simple. Why? Because only the provisions are asked, because GST law is separate for each and every state. Only the central law is common to everybody. Hence, the provisions of the GST are very simple and easy to understand and easy to write. In the GST, you can score a very good marks. Moving on, the entire syllabus of the taxation paper is divided as 50 marks for direct taxation and 50 marks for indirect taxation. In the 50 marks for direct taxation, it is of income tax, entire is of income tax, and 50 marks for indirect is for 15, that is 50 marks GST. In direct taxation paper, if you cover, say, some basic chapters, if you cover some basic chapters, then what you can do is, if you cover these topics, you can score a very good marks. The topics are, say, in the basic concepts which are being covered, the residential status, The important is deduction under Chapter 6A, advanced tax, TDS, TCS, and return of income. These are the important topics, and also the weightage of the topic is more. Second, the amount of time which you invest in this topic is very less, and these topics give a very good return. For example, if you invest on 1 hour studying on these topics which I discussed right now, you can score a very good marks on these topics. Further to elaborate on this is, you have all the five heads of income, that is house property, salary, capital gain, PGBP, and other source. So all these heads of income also form part of your syllabus. Now, the important question is how to study for your exam paper. So you have in indirect taxation you have two modules, Module 1 and Module 2. In Module 1, it talks about GST, how it was introduced in India, why it is necessary, the supply under GST, the charge of GST, the exemptions from GST, then the time value of supply, the time of supply and the value of supply. This is covered in the Module 1. In Module 2, it covers about the input tax credit, then registration procedure, tax invoice, debit note, credit notes, e-way bill, payment of tax and returns. In the direct taxation paper, that is income tax law, there are three modules, Module 1, Module 2, and Module 3. In Module 1, it is all of basics, that is the basic concepts, resident and total scope, income which do not form the part of total income. Next is Module 2. Module 2 is about five heads of income, that is income from salary, income from HP, PGBP, capital gain, and other source. Module 3 is in detail, it's a much advanced thing. That is, it covers about the income which forms a part of assess's total income, then aggregation of income, set of clubbing provisions, then deduction from gross total income, that is Chapter 6A deduction, that is computation of total income and tax payable. Next is the advanced tax, TDS and TCS, and provisions for filing of return and self-assessment. This is the entire syllabus of the direct taxation paper and indirect taxation paper. In direct taxation paper, the main important part to be underlined here is when you have these five heads of income, that is the module 2, income from salary, HP, PGBP, capital gain, and other source, institute institute just check your working knowledge. So here it is important to know how you know the provisions are, how you interpret the provision, how you are going to apply the practical provisions in your articleship period. That is the objective of the institute in framing the questions. So if you see the question paper pattern, the main focus of the institute is to check the knowledge, that is a working knowledge of an individual or the student, which will be applicable for his articleship period. In this, I request you to please note down the marks wise, which is my individual analysis, which comes in the exams. See, the residency status, section 6, this comes for around 4 to 6 marks. Set of and clubbing provision, there is a compulsory question from this from last 4 to 5 attempts of almost 5 to 6 marks. Next, there is a deduction under Chapter 6A. There is a compulsory question of this around 4 to 8 marks. Then there are questions from advanced tax, TDS, TCS, return of incomes around say 8 to 10 marks. So even if you cover these topics, which will cover almost 50 marks, and there is a 14 marks compulsory question, which will cover the entire, say, income from salary, income from PGBP, capital gain calculation will be covered in that 14 marks itself. So that will be an entire question on computation of the gross total income. One, second, computation of taxes on that gross total income, and the payment of taxes. And if the payment is not done within the due date, the advance tax liability and all this, that will be computed in, that will be a 14 marks question, it will be there. So the next here to discuss is what are the methods that you are going to use for studying in your exams, for studying for your exams. Now, if you're going to appear for these exams, say due to COVID-19, I hope all are safe and studying at home. Due to COVID-19, the exams are being postponed and they will be conducted in the month of June as per the latest institute circular. And for the months of November examination, what should be your approach for study? I'll elaborate. I'll discuss that in detail. What you should do is while studying, while you are doing your own individual classes, or even if you are doing a pen drive class or you are doing a self study, during the first reading itself or during the classes itself, you have to do what you have to do is you have to write the notes in detail. Why? The detailed notes are to be made short as per your own convenience. Why? Because when you start with your studies, and you have to keep an objective in mind that this notes will be useful a day before examination. This notes I am going to read a day before examination. The DT and in IDT, the subjects are too vast. The income tax and GST, the syllabus which we have, is too vast. That is being difficult to cover in entire single day. So if it is not, if we are not able to cover the entire syllabus, a revision is not done a day before the examination, then it would be difficult for all of us, for the students who are going to appear for the exams, to score a very good marks. Hence, the request would be while doing the first reading, you have to do is you have to note down the important points in that sections. For example, if you are discussing section 6, the residential status, or if you are discussing the section 28, that is charging section for PGBP, in that what you have to do is you have to write your own notes in the top of the module which you have. Or if you don't want to write in the module itself, what you can do is you can make a separate notebook of say 200 pages that will be useful for your CA final examinations as well. So what you can do is while studying the section itself or studying that provision, you can prepare a separate notebook. In that separate notebook, you can write in detail what was the section is, what are the important points to remember, what is the crux of that section, and what are the simple shortcuts. For example, in salary, you have to calculate the gratuity, the taxable gratuity, the pension, or you have to calculate the HRA, or you have to calculate the leave. So the taxation of the leave which you get. So you have to calculate a lot of things in that. So you have to remember the section 10 exemptions which are being given, or the benefits which are being given. So taxation of HRA, that is how it is calculated as lower of the three. One, actual HRA received. Second, rent paid in excess of 10% of salary. And third, 40% of the salary or 50% of the salary, as the case may be. If it's a metro city, that would be a 50%. If it is a non-metro city, other than the four metro cities which we have, that will be a 40%. So the salary definition for HRA is different than salary definition from other section. For perquisite rent calculation, the taxation, the definition is different. For HRA, the definition of salary is the basic salary plus DNS allowance, which next the commission which is paid as percentage of turnover, and this forms the part of salary. So there are different definitions of salary for a particular section. You have to remember in this way. Why? Because institute will check, in exams will ask a question, and also you have to compute the total income after allowing the deductions which are available under section, say, for HRA, for which is available under section 6, under section 10. So you have to discuss this, you have to write down this, the definition of salary. Or what you can do is you can also prepare, while preparing your notes, while having the first reading itself, you can prepare the notes, and while preparing the notes you can prepare a table format. For example, deduction for HRA, the deduction would be lower of the three, one, two, three. Definition of salary give there. Then the allowance which you get, the taxation part of the allowance, the perquisites which you get, the taxation parts of perquisite. You can prepare a table. What will happen is in that table itself, you will be able to get to know what are the provisions, what is definition for salary for this section, and this section. That will be easy and handy notes which can be read a day before the examination. One. Second, once the first reading is done, a thorough reading first is done while you with your classes or during your pen drive sessions, or if you are doing your own self study. Once this is done, you have the notebook ready in which you'll have a separate notebook for income tax, a separate notebook for GST. In income tax, you'll have all the provisions which are applicable to your examination written, and that will be a short form, and that will help you a one day before revision. Second, in this, after this, once you are done with the first reading, second reading or first revision, what you have to do is you have to do a thorough revision. A thorough revision of what you have to what you have discussed. One second, what you have already studied. Next, you have to also download the recent RTPs which are available on the institute website. You should also have the recent suggested question papers of last 4 attempts. RTPs, the suggested, should be downloaded with you. Also, there are some publications which are being published by institute. You can also directly download from the institute websites. These are available to you free of cost. What you can do is you can download them, you can take a print of them. In the first revision itself, you can read that provisions in detail. Along with that, you can try to solve the questions which are there. So, for example, if you have 8 RTPs and 4 suggested, you can divide them. Say 8 RTPs, from that 4 RTPs will be done in the first revision itself. You can read the provision in detail. Once the provision is being done by you, take that questions from that RTP, read that question and try to solve that question by your own. If you are able to solve that question by your own, then your understanding of the subject is very good. But if you are not able to solve that question correctly, if you are not able to give the explanation to that provisions, or you are not able to explain the law, or you are not able to compute the thing which is being given in the question, then what you have to do is in the first reading, first revision, that is the second reading, you have to again go through that provision in a detailed manner and try to remember that provision. This will help you in noting that where which are my plus points where I'm trying to remember it, and what are the negatives which I have. If you have something negatives, for example, if you are not able to compute the taxation part of a capital gain taxation is not done by you properly, then in that you have to read again the section 45, then the deductions which are being available, taxation part, this is section 112 or section 111A for short term and long term, 111A for short term capital gain calculation, 112 for long term capital gain calculation. You can do it again. So what will this help in? This will enable you in preparing where are my plus points and where are my negative points. In the negative points, you can pick up and you can do a thorough revision in the first reading itself. For the first revision itself, that is in the second reading. Second reading should be a detailed reading. In the detailed reading, you'll be get to know where I lack, what are my plus points, what are my negative points. In that notebook itself, which you have prepared, a separate notebook, you can note down this is where I was lacking and this is where I need to focus more. I have to give emphasis on this section particularly more. So this is the importance of the second reading or the first revision. After you are done with this, then comes the second revision or third reading. This has to be a very fast reading. A fast reading means the balance RTPs and the suggested which you have, that should be done in a very fast manner. What you have to do is you have to take a separate notebook. You have to take that suggested question paper or the question paper or last 4 attempts or the RTPs which you have, and you have to try to solve that question paper by yourself. And by this, what you have to do is you have to keep your notebook which you have prepared a day before revision notebook. You have to keep ready with you. If you are not able to solve that question, then you have to take that notebook, check the provisions, and try to solve that question. What will this help in? This will again help you in boost your confidence by knowing in which areas you are good and which areas you are not. In the areas which are not so good, you can prepare again, and keeping that notebook with you, what you can do is you can take a different pen and mark on that pen second revision, and this was the topic which I was lacking. So this is the entire thing which you can do. This is about the second revision. And in after the solving of question paper, this will help you or enable you in knowing what is the plus point which I have and what is the negative points which I have. And the question paper should be solved in an examination manner or examination atmosphere. So, for example, your exam start at a particular time and end at a particular time. Then you should set the time during a day. For example, if you are comfortable, say 10 to 1 or at any time, you can take that 15 minutes before you can take the question paper. You can go through the question paper once. Once you have gone through the question paper, then you can take your notebook. You can draw the lines as you do in the examinations. You can draw the formats. You can try to solve that paper. Keep an alarm of 3 hours and try to solve. And the important part to be noted here is Not a single mark should not be given more than 2 minutes. This is the important ratio which you should keep in mind. One mark should get maximum 2 minutes. For example, if you are solving a question of 14 marks, the maximum time which you are going to invest in that 14 marks question is 28 minutes. You can give a 2 minutes of grace, 30 minutes. 30 minutes is maximum enough for that 14 marks question. Even if you go beyond 30 minutes, then that is a critical sign. Then you will not be able to attempt the entire paper. You will not be able to solve the entire paper which is being there. So you have to keep in mind this ratio of 2 minutes for 1 mark, or 1 mark should maximum be given a time of 2 minutes. This is an important thing. And the 30 marks which you have of MCQs, this is an added advantage. If you follow this ratio, and even if you go for 5-10 minutes a delay, for example, the 14 marks question was to be solved in 30 minutes, and if you have 5 minutes delay, you can cover by delay in the 30 marks MCQ which you have, because that 30 marks is not a descriptive answer. You have to just to think, you have to calculate, and you have to answer that. Hence, you can have the time adjustment, but you have to follow this ratio very carefully while your practice exams. That is when you do at your home. So once you are done with the suggested solving, you can check by your own self where I am wrong, where I am correct. And by this, you'll get to know, you'll help yourself by letting you know what is my strength, what is my weakness. And you can particularly focus on the topics which are doing very good. You can emphasize on that. One. And second, the topics which are lagging, you can do a detailed reading on that topic. So the revision number 2 or the reading number 3 would be a very quick revision along with solving of the paper. And revision number 4 is directly solving of the paper. What you can do is you can prepare your own paper, or you can download the mock test paper which are being available, or you can give an institute examination, the mock test examination. And in that examination, you can go, you can appear, and you'll get to know how I'm trying to solve that paper. These exams actually happen in an controlled environment, the actual institute environment in which the exams are being conducted. So you'll be get to know where I lack, and if you go by this method, you'll be able to attempt at least I'm saying 90 marks paper. If you are able to attempt 90 marks paper, then I'm sure you'll get minimum 65 to 70 marks. And if this subject goes for 65 to 70 marks, your group is automatically cleared. Why? Because this gives an added advantage, and this gives you a much more cushion which is required for that passing marks. I'll just repeat what I told how to do a study. First, what you have to do is, first you have to do a first reading. The first reading will be done along with your classes or pen drive notes, which you do, pen drive lectures, or your own self study. In that, while doing this lectures, what you have to do is you have to prepare a separate notebook. In that separate notebook, you have to write down the important provisions. You have to write down the short form of the entire provision. For example, if you are going to write off section 112, then you have to write off two things: for resident, for non-resident. For resident, the taxation is this much. For non-resident, the taxation is this much. Then what is for long-term capital asset? So the taxation is different for a different capital assets. So you have to elaborate in that manner. Then again, if you are going, you have to link that section with section 45, section 48, how the taxation will operate. Again, you have to also take into consideration the deductions which are given in the capital gain exemption itself. So what will happen is you'll do a total linking study. So even if you pick up a section, that will be linked with other section, and you get to know everything. For example, we are discussing about taxation of salary part. If a person is getting a salary and if he is going to retire, then he'll get gratuity, he'll get pension, superannuation, and all this. The taxation part of that also plays an important role. So what you have to do is you have to study that salary part considering all the other aspects. So the taxation part of it also we covered. Also, you have to link that with section 10. Section 10 of say how the deductions are being computed, how the exemption are being computed, and all this. So you'll be able to do a complete study. In that study, you are preparing your separate notes in a separate notebook, separate for income tax, separate for GST. Why? Because they will be helpful in the final studies as well. Studies for CA final examinations. A separate notebook of both of them. And in that notebook itself, you can note down the important sections. You can quote the sections. You can quote the case studies as well. The case studies, for example, the important case studies which you have, you can quote down the case studies and you can write the crux of that case study. For example, a case study saying that this and as per this case study, this was allowed deduction, this was disallowed deduction. You can write that. An important point here to be mentioned is there are additional publications of the institute. That is a supplementary which is being published by the institute, and a book of case studies which is being published by the institute. You can download that from the website of the institute, and after downloading it from the website of the institute, you can do a revision of that. Once your first reading is done, and once you are prepared with a notebook, separate notebooks for income tax and GST, then what you can do is, while preparing that itself, you can give 30 minutes of each day, 30 minutes of each day for that case study and supplementary book. From that case study and supplementary, you have to read the case study on a daily basis. At least you have to read and understand and memorize case study, minimum 2 case studies a day, and you can leave some space in the notebook itself, and you can write the case study which is being applicable. So in that case study book, the institute has given the latest case studies which are being applicable, that is given in a chapter wise manner. So for example, for chapter 1, chapter 2, all the 5 heads of income, which are the case studies available or applicable that are being given, so you can write down in your notebook. That is an important part. Why? Because the case studies and supplementary which you are going to prepare for plays an important role while solving the paper. We are going to discuss this in the later part of our video. Then you have to give at least 30 minutes of each day. In the supplementary, the latest notifications, circulars, amendments which are being issued by CBDT or related by the central government, changes in the forms and all this being which is being notified are also incorporated in that book, the supplementary book, which is being published by the institute. Next, once you are done with this reading, and parallelly after the first reading, you can parallelly start the case study book and the supplementary books. After you are done with the first reading, you can start with the second reading or the first revision. First revision should be a detailed revision. In that detailed revision, you can take last 4 years books, say suggested or RTPs. From that, you can pick up the questions and try to solve. If you are able to solve it properly, then that is well and good. You are well versed with the provision. If you are not able to solve that question properly, then you can again refer your notebook and you can mark there, I was not able to solve this question, and hence again I am going to read this question. After this, once you are done with this, you have to go for a third revision. In third revision, you have to actually solve the question paper which are there with you, taking the help of the notebook in which you have prepared your entire syllabus. This is to be done in the exam controlled manner. And if you are not able to solve any question, then and there only you have to take that notebook and read that provision once. If you are done with the reading, if you understand that provision, again write that provisions. So this is the third reading or second revision. Once you are done with this, last stage is solving of the question papers. You have the remaining question paper, let it be a suggested, let it be a RTP. You can take that, you can prepare an exam controlled atmosphere, as that is an examination. Take the question before 15 minutes of the time when you have decided to give that examination. Take that question paper, start with reading of that question paper for first 15 minutes. Then once you are done with the reading of the question paper, then what you have to do is you have to start writing your paper. Once the paper is done after 3 hours, once the paper are done, you have to try to write that paper, and once the paper is being done for the 3 hours, you have to again check by yourself where I have done good, where I am not able to solve it properly. And once you are done with that, you can also appear for the mock test papers which are being conducted by the institute. So what will this enable is, this will enable you to have a complete knowledge of the entire syllabus. You'll be having a very good confidence with you because you have done a first reading, second reading, third reading, you have done a quick reading, you have solved the question papers, you are well versed with the case studies, you know the latest amendments, circulars, notifications, you have done a study in a very good manner, you have done a study to link every section to that particular topic. For example, if you are discussing HP, in HP the institute has generally 4 to 8 marks question. What is the treatment of arrears of rent? What is the treatment for rent which is received in advance? The rent which is not yet received? The taxation of the taxation part, that is the municipal taxes paid. The taxation of paid linked with the salary questions. If you have a loss from PGP, whether it is being allowed to set off against the salary income, that is again question to all of you. That has been covered in what clubbing provisions or set off of losses provisions. that all are interlinked, and once you do a such interlinking study, this will help in boosting your confidence. Once you are done with this study, what you can do is you are ready to go for the examination. While going for the examination, you have to also keep in mind in which pattern the ICI Institute is going to conduct the examination, because that is also important. You should know what are the questions that are being asked, what are the important provisions, what are the things, and what I need to keep in mind. The important point to be kept in mind, as we discussed already, is the ratio of marks to minutes. That is the time in which you are going to solve the entire 100 marks paper. If you want to solve the entire 100 marks paper, you have to always keep this ratio in mind. That is, you should not invest more than 2 minutes for 1 mark, not more than 2 minutes for 1 mark. If you are investing more than 2 minutes for 1 marks, you are not solving the entire question paper. You will not be able to solve the entire question paper. Hence, this is an important part. You have to remember this. Now, moving on, what are the important topics that should be prepared compulsorily, so you can have a very good marks, you can score a very good marks, and investing a far less time as compared to the others. So the important sections which you have to remember is important topics which you have to cover is the basic concepts, then the residential status, then the setting off and clubbing provision. Setting off and clubbing provision, institute has regularly asked on this on a very multiple times, and this is very important part which everybody should cover in detail. Next, deduction under Chapter 6A, which are being allowed. For example, if a person he has his own business, and if he is doing his own business, he has a property which he is living in. It is a rented property. So, if that is a rented property, he will not be allowed a deduction for HRA. That is house rent allowance, as he is not a salaried employee. He is a businessman. So, is there any other provisions which is being applicable to him? Yeah, there is a deduction which is being available under Chapter 6A, which is that deduction. I keep that question open so you can go and check in which section the deduction will be allowed to a person who is doing his own business, that is a self-employed person. So deduction is available under section chapter 6A. So which section you have to go and find out. Next, you have to also study the advanced tax provisions, the TDS and TCS provisions, and the return of income provisions. For example, section 139(1) is for filing of return. So what are the due dates for that and all this. Next, section 139(4), 139(5), and all this. This is also to be remembered. Sometimes you should also ask question on these topics as well. After done with this, you have to also study. These were the important topics. This will have a very less time which is being invested and fetch a very good amount of marks. And also you have to cover. It should compulsory ask a question on the house property thing. So the house property is being given the fair market value, the municipal value, the actual rent received. You have to compute that. Then you have to give the standard deduction. You have to give the benefit of municipal taxes paid. Everything is to be covered along with the other sections if the institute has introduced. For example, if a person has two properties, which is more beneficial for that person to show? Both are, suppose say one is both are vacant properties. If a person is not if a person is having more than one property and both the properties are vacant, so which will be the more beneficial property to show as is self-occupied, and which will be the beneficial to show as let out? So you have to compute that and give that answer. So you have to keep in mind what are the deductions available, what is the maximum interest which is being allowed, the interest which you pay on the housing loan that is being allowed for all the properties, that along with the standard deductions which you have, that also should be kept in mind. So that is one question compulsory from house property. Then generally institute, what it does is institute ask a 14 marks question on PGBP plus salary plus capital gain plus your chapter 6A deduction, that is computation of the gross total income including the 2 to 3 heads, plus the deduction under chapter 6A and the computation of tax thereon. So for computation of tax thereon, sometimes the tax is directly computed if there is no other special tax rate applicable to that income, that head of income or that source of income. If that is a tax at a special rate, for example, if you have sold a house property and that is taxed at the rate of 20%. Then, after you have the gross total income with you, you have to segregate that gross total income minus Chapter 6A deduction, minus deduction if any. You have the net income. Net income again split into two parts. One taxed at a special rate, one taxed at a normal rate. The amount which is taxed at a special rate, for example, sale of house property, which is a long-term house property, that will be taxed at a flat 20% rate, and the others will be taxed at a normal slab rate which you have. So you have to compute in that manner. That is a 14 marks question that is being asked by the institute. Similarly, for GST, if you go for GST, the provisions are very simple for GST. For example, in GST, generally institute ask the question in such manner that say they have there is a sale of thing, and what is the total taxable value, or compute the taxable value, computation of taxable value for that, or the provisions which are being asked by the institute are when we are going to consider this as a supply, what are the exemptions available under GST, what is charge of GST, how you take the input tax credit of a specific commodity if you have purchased, then you have to reverse the input tax credit, and what are the consequences if a person files return and does not pay any amount of GST, what are the late fees that has been paid. So question is, in GST the questions are very simple. Why? Because once you get to know what are the provisions in GST are, you have a very good head on. Why? Because you don't have to study each state-wise act of the SGST. That is, Maharashtra state will have a different SGST act. That is Maharashtra GST act. The Madhya Pradesh government will have a different act. So every act is different, but the crux of every act is same. But you don't have to study. You have to just study the central act which is big there. So the one of the question was, Mr. Shah, a consignor, was required to move goods from Ahmedabad to Gujarat. His transporter, he appointed a transporter Mehta for transportation of goods. Mehta moves the goods from Ahmedabad to Kheda. After completing of the goods from Kheda to Gujarat, Mehta now hands over goods to transporter Parekh. Explain the procedure regarding e-way bill to be followed by the consignor and the transporters as per the provisions of the GST law and rules made thereunder. So, in this, what you have to do is the transportation was to be done from Gujarat, say Ahmedabad to Nadiad. It was not done directly. It was in a breakwise manner. So, first it was transported from Ahmedabad to Kheda, and from Kheda to Nadia, a different transporter was appointed. Generally, the e-way bill is to be taken for the entire consignment. But if there is a break in this consignment, so consignor A breaks this, and the transporter does not supplies that good to the end point, and he appoints a different transporter. What is the provision of the GST, and what are the provisions of the e-way bill that need to be considered? These are the questions. So this is a very simple question to be answered, and the provisions are very simple. You can answer this question with the help of the CGST Act, which has been given, and the GST law which you have. Yeah. Moving on to next point. Moving on to next, we have discussed what are the syllabus, what is important parts to study, how to study, on which topic you need to focus on for income tax, for GST. Then, what is the paper pattern of question? We are going to discuss on that. What are the paper patterns for question? So, the paper pattern is what? The paper pattern is one. You have the entire 100 marks paper is split into two things, part A and part B. The part A is 30 marks, and part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is for 30 marks and part 2 is for 70 marks. Part 1, which is for 30 marks, is the MCQs which you have, and part 2, which is for 70 marks, is the descriptive questions which you have to answer in detail. So part A, which is for 30 marks, is the MCQ question. In that MCQ, generally the institute also focus on the basic questions which are being there. For example, institute ask what are the residential status of person. So if a person is an Indian person, a person of Indian origin, and he goes from India to outside India for taking up employment outside India, then and he is in India for say 162 days, what will be residential status in India? So his residential status will be India, will be dependent upon Section 6, the physical stay days in India. There is also an exemption to this. a proviso to this which discussed about if a person is going outside India as a member, if a person is going outside India for taking up employment outside India, or if a person is going for as a member of crew or ship, the provisions are different. You have to answer this question of the MCQs. So the MCQs are prepared in such a manner that they test your conceptual clarity. So the 30 marks MCQs are very simple to attempt, and from this 30 marks, you can at least score minimum 20 marks. Why? Because the 15 marks MCQs are very simple from the basic provisions. Even if you have read all the questions for at least once, gone through the entire syllabus, and as we discussed, if you have gone through the RTPs suggested, the supplementary and the case study books which are being issued by the institute, the 15 marks will be covered from that only. And also the practice manual which you have, the practice manual is nothing but the examination questions from last all the attempts. So practice manual is the compilation of the all questions which are being asked in the exams. Even if you go through that entire thing in a detailed manner, you will be able to solve the 15 marks MCQs. So 15 marks will be a very good easy take for you. Next 5 marks will be a difficult, or no, not difficult, a medium question sort of 5 to 8 marks. So that will be also easy to take for you. So 15 plus 5, 20 marks you have got, and from the remaining 10 marks, that will be a somewhat a difficult level. Sometimes you should also ask to compute the TDS from that. The computation of TDS, a question is for computation of TDS, or what is the deduction allowed for a particular thing, or what are the exemptions, what is the exempt amount of gratuity which is being paid to a central government employee, or suppose a private sector employee, he is being given an entertainment allowance, whether that will be a taxable or non-taxable. Whether it is a taxable, then will it be an exempt? So as we all know, the entertainment allowance which you get is only allowed as deductions only for the government employees, not for the private employees. So these are the simple questions which you ask. Or which articles talks about the taxation? Say Article 246 and 265 of the Constitution of India. They talks about taxation. That is, tax cannot be collected unless the authority of the law. So that is being given. You should ask about this articles sections as well. The articles of constitute, how that tax was done. One more question which is being asked by the institute is, suppose X is an employee of Z Limited who receives say 1,25,000 as gratuity, which is being covered under the Payment of Gratuity Act. He retires on same a specific date. For example, he retires on 31st January 2020 after the service of 29 years and 8 months. At the time of retirement, this the amount which you withdraw, the last drawn salary is 5,200 and the monthly bonus of 200. Compute the amount of gratuity exempt in the instant case under section 1010 of the Income Tax Act. Now you have to compute the gratuity which is being exempt under section 1010. So you have four options. Option number one is 90,000. Option number 9 lakh. Option number two is 1 lakh. Sorry. Option number one is 90,000. Option number two is 1,25,000, then 78,000, then 87,000. What you have to do is you have to calculate the amount of gratuity being exempt under section 1010 of Income Tax Act. That is being a question which is being asked. This is somewhat a difficult level question that are for 10 marks, which is being asked by the institute. This questions has a weightage of almost 10 marks, so this types of questions. And if you are prepared thoroughly, you can get 10 on 10 on this as well. So from the 30 marks MCQs, I say the 20 marks are very easy to score, and the remaining 10 marks depends on you. If you have a very good knowledge of that subject, you can score the entire 10 on 10. So almost from 100 marks paper, you are ready with 20-25 marks of that. And from remaining 70, that if you can score at least 50 marks, you can go more than exemption. So you can at least score 60 to 70 marks from this. Now we will go one by one and discuss how the 70 marks paper is being distributed. You all might have aware of how the question paper pattern is and all this. I'm just going to add how you are going to solve that paper. So remember very carefully, and this is an important part for that. That is, from the 70 marks paper which you have, that is again divided. That part 2 of the question paper, part 1 is MCQ, part 2 is 70 marks. 70 marks, part 2 is divided into two sections. That is section A and section B. Section A is of income tax and section B is of indirect taxation. So section A of income tax In that, the question number one, that is a compulsory question. That generally is for 14 marks. I am talking that generally is for 14 marks. From question 2 to 4, you have to solve any two questions. You have to solve any two questions from this question number 2 to 4. Then again, section B starts after that. That is the indirect tax, that is GST. That is section 5 is again compulsory question. And question 6 to 8, you have to solve any two questions from question number 6 to 8. Now, how to solve this paper practically and how to score good marks from this 70 marks? What you have to do is, when you have that 15 minutes with you, do not go for MCQ question. MCQ, you can leave it aside. If we have time, we can do it later. But take this first question. I am talking about the initial 15 minutes. I am talking about initial 15 minutes. What you can do is, you can take the question paper with you, read that question paper very nicely and thoroughly. For example, in the question paper, the first 14 marks is for is a PGP question along with salary, along with the household rent, income from rental property and all this. So what you have to do is, you have to compute the total income of the person. You have to compute the total income of that person, considering the income from salary, income from the house property which has been there. You have to consider all these points. In this, what you have to do is, while you're reading the question paper for initial 15 minutes, in that reading itself, you have to mark the additional information which is being given. For example, in the question number one, there are explanatory information or additional information which is being given at the end of the question. You have to note down the adjustment in the question itself. So you have a question and you will have adjustment parts. So in the questions part, what you have to do is, you have to write adjustment number one. You have to write in the question itself in the initial 15 minutes. In the same manner, what will happen is, if you follow this method, you will not be skipping a single adjustment which are being there. A lot many times what happens is, when we write the examination, we are in a lot of hurry to write that exam. So what we do is, we just write that question, we see the adjustment if any, and we solve that exam, question. Once the question is done with, आफ्टर दैट वी गेट टू नो, अरे यार ये टॉपिक का ये क्वेश्चन था, इसका ये एडजस्टमेंट था, ये एडजस्टमेंट बहुत अच्छे से मुझे आता था, पर मैं ये करना भूल गया, ये एडजस्टमेंट स्किप हो गया. So this would happen. Why? Because you are in a hurry to attempt that paper. But initial 15 minutes, you can take that for your own advantage. What you can do is, in that 15 minutes only, you can write the adjustment number one to the question number point. Adjustment number one. Adjustment number two in the question paper itself. Adjustment number two. For example, you will be given a profit and loss statement which has been taken from the books of accounts. From that books of accounts, say in the credit sides, you have consultancy income, you have income from house property, you have income from other source, you have income from salary. This is being given in the adjustment. Suppose in second adjustment, it is given that arrears of rents amounts to this and rent not received amount to this. So in the profit and loss statement itself, you have credit sides one heading, that income from house property. You can write then and there only with pencil, adjustment number two, or two number you can write there only, or you can mark something. So what will happen is, while going to that adjustment, you have to definitely go to that adjustment number two, and you will be, if you follow this method, you will not be skipping a single adjustment. You have to do for this dissection for the entire paper which you have. This is for the entire paper which you have, even for the GST part as well. If you follow this for the income tax as well as GST part, you will not be skipping any adjustment, and you will be giving justice to all the questions which you have in the exams. Then you start with the paper at actual time, that is 2 o'clock. 2 to 5 we have the paper. At 2 o'clock specifically, what you can do is, you can either decide first to take your MCQ paper or to take your 70 marks part 2 paper. Generally, what is being preferred is, you can take that MCQ paper. Remember, you can solve the questions which you know. Write the circle that directly, if you are possible to do that, if that is permitted and allowed. If not, you can save it for the later part, or you can just read the questions, keep that questions in mind, and while solving the question paper, you'll automatically remember what is the answer of that particular MCQ. You can do in this fashion as well. If not, you can, as per your convenience, you can decide, can take at the start, in the beginning, or in the middle, or in the end. Okay. Once this is done, once this dissection is done, so once you start with the paper, an important part comes here. Why? Because we are going to start with question number one. Question number one, that is a 14 marks question, that is generally a compulsory question. When you are solving this question, this first question plays an important part while you are solving the question. Once you start with the question, what you have to do is you have to leave sufficient space for writing that question, and in the second page or the third page, as per your convenience and the space which you require, you have to write working notes. Notes number one. For example, you are writing computation of gross total income and tax thereof, if this is the heading. So Mr. A, assessment year, previous year, computation of total income, gross total income and tax thereof. You are writing, say, income from house property, and you are writing something there. You are writing the amount. That income from house property, the amount which you write there should be support and backed by the working note. So working note number one, you are going to write profit, the house property income as per profit and loss statement which is being given amount. So additions, deductions, anything which is not being given in the additional information which you have to do that. Once you are done with that, the amount is given, and below that itself, what you have to do is you have to write why you have done in such a manner, why you have added the arrears of rent, why you have added the rent which is not received, why we have done this. So you have to give the explanation to that effect, why we have done in a particular manner. Once you have written this, for every provision which you write, for every taxation part which you write, for every answer, for every amount which you write, if you are able to provide a working note or a explanation to that thing, say note number one, note number two, note number three, as much notes as you have, if you are able to write that, then I guarantee you, I assure you that you will be able to score a very good marks. Why? Because generally while writing the paper, even if you have gone wrong with a particular thing, even if that was allowed and you have not allowed it, you have disallowed it, if you have done a wrong calculation, you have done a wrong method of doing that, but if you have a working note supporting to that, the marks will be given to the working notes. If the working notes are in a proper manner, you will get a very good marks, because the marks are being divided to the working notes also. So you'll get a 1 mark or a half mark for that working note. And in this scenario, as the marks are distributed, the marks are given in a stepwise manner. Out of the 14 marks, you'll be able to score at least minimum 11 to 12 marks in that question, even if you have done wrong with some part of that question. If the entire question is correct, then the entire 14 marks will be allotted to you. Why? Because you have given a detailed explanation of that provisions in the answer itself. And what institute thinks is the amount is not important. Why the amount is not important? The amount, maybe the amount which you write may be by fluke amount, or you may have copied from the portions which are there, or maybe anything you can write, and just amount which might be correct, which may not be correct. But the explanation which you give, the examiner will get to know that the person knows what the provision is, why he is disallowed. He knows the section. If you are knowing the section, you can quote the section as well. The case studies, as I said earlier, 30 minutes every day should be given to case studies. If you know the case studies, then what you can do is you can quote the case studies particularly. As per this case law, this was allowed. As per this case law, this was disallowed. As per the judgment of Supreme Court in this. So this was allowed, this was disallowed. You can write that. And once you do in this manner, you have a very good advantage. Why? Because you know the provisions and you are writing in such a detailed manner, you are getting a stepwise answers. You have to write the entire paper in this manner. And for computation of TDS and TCS and for clubbing and set of provisions, institute generally ask a questions for at least 8 to 10 marks. So you have to be ready with that provisions as well. So once you are done with this thing, and after doing this, if you have time, you can highlight the important provision from the entire section, entire answer which I have written. You can draw very nice tables to that effect. You can highlight the important case study if you have quoted in that. You can highlight the sections which you have quoted in that. In this, what will happen is your paper will be good enough. The examiner will get to know that yes, you have a very good knowledge of that paper. Yes, you have a very good understanding of that subject, and you will be able to score a very good marks in that. And out of, if you solve this paper in this manner, then out of 50 marks you'll be able to score a minimum of, out of 70 marks you'll be minimum scoring 50 marks to that effect. 50 marks of this and 20 marks from the MCQs. You'll be able to score of minimum 70 marks in your TT examination. So just to revise what we have discussed, one, you have to remember is, first what you have to do is you have to purchase, say, or download from the institute websites which are being the material which is being readily available. What you can do is you have a practice manual. Practice manual of DT is never to be ignored. Why? Because these questions, the practice manual has the questions which are being asked from previous exams. So practice manual one. Second, you should have at least last 2 years RTPs and suggested. Third, you should have supplementary book with you. Fourth, you should have the RTP with you. Fifth, you should have suggested with you of at least 4 to 5 years. Then a case study book and a supplementary which is being issued by the institute. Once you have done this, you can start with the study. In the first reading itself, you can do a very good revision. You have to prepare a separate notebook. In that separate notebook, you have to write in detail about that provision. This will be a handy guide, a day before examination guide. Once you are done with that, then you have to do a first reading, first revision, that is a second reading. In that first reading, that should be a thorough reading. Second revision or the third reading, in that you have to be a very quick, so you have to do it quickly, and you can solve the question paper which are being with you, the RTPs or the suggested which you have. Then in the next thing, you have to actually try to solve. If you are not able to solve, you should have the notebook ready with you which you have prepared. You have to compare what I am able to solve, what I am able to not, I am not able to solve that. Once you are done with this, you have to actual frame an environment, in examination environment. You have to give a timer of 3 hours and try to solve that paper. This is the entire thing how to study. Next, what are the important topics that is to be covered? For example, there are some topics which are very lengthy, but they come for, generally they come for very less marks. But there are some topics which are small and which comes for a good amount of weightage. So you have to focus on the topics. The topics I am again going to tell is the residency status, set of employment provisions, deductions, advanced tax, TDS, TCS, the house property computations, and the agriculture income. So these are the provisions you need to discuss. Once you're done with this, then you have to at least try to solve the mock test papers which are being given, or the mock test examination. You have to try to give that examinations. Once you are done with this, once this is done, while going for the examination, one day before the examination, you have to do from the notebook which you have to do a revision. You should also keep in mind the recent case studies, circulars, and all this which are being notified, which are being applicable to your exams. You have to read all this. While writing the exams, you have to take into consideration the time which you have. The important part to be remember here is not more than 2 minutes should be allowed for 1 marks question. So for a question of 14 marks, the maximum time which you're going to invest is 28 marks, 28 minutes or 30 minutes. Not more than 30 minutes should be allowed. Even if you go 5-10 minutes here and there, you can later catch up. But while solving in the exams, that before the examinations, why you are trying to do at home. So if you follow this practice in exams, you will be at least able to solve the question of 80 to 100 marks. 90 marks you are able to solve it. And once you are done with this, while actually solving the exam paper, you have to make the markings on the question paper, that is adjustment number 1, 2, 3, 4 and all this. And while solving the papers, you have to give the references and you have to give a detailed notes of that. Once you have given the notes, note number 1, it talks about this. If you know the section, you can quote that section, but do not quote the wrong section. If you don't know the section, please do not quote it, but do not quote the wrong section. So once you are done with quoting of sections, then you can give the case studies to that effect and you have to solve the entire paper in this manner. So even if you have any doubts in this, you can comment in the comment section. And I would like to again thank you for watching this video. I would also like to thank the Vikasa, the ICI branch, of Pimpri Chinchwad, Vikasa of ICI Pimpri Chinchwad branch. Also, the Vikasa chairman of Pimpri Chinchwad branch, CH LH Bore sir, program coordinator Pratima madam, and Dipali madam, technical coordinator Mr. Kiran Sonone. And I also again wish to thank the Pimpri Chinchwad branch of WIRC of ICI for giving me this opportunity to speak with the intermediate students to prepare how to prepare for that taxation paper. I thank you. Thank you so much, students.